What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we are on the Suburban. And why are we on the Suburban? Well, we got a couple issues, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, I got to get this out of the way. I did not sell the OBS, okay? Somebody's going to look around in here and inevitably say, where's the OBS? It's actually outside. It normally is parked here, and this thing sets outside. So I needed this area to work on this. That is what's going on. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So on to what we have going on today. So you guys may or may not know, this is a two-wheel drive 2011 Suburban. I did drop this thing. So probably about 10,000 miles ago, been a couple months now. I drive the wheels off this thing. I absolutely love it. We lowered this. Now I did, in the front, I did a spindle and drop strut, and in the back I just did springs with some lowering spindles, and then I also did a relocation for the lower arms. But if you guys haven't checked that video out, I did make a video on the drop. But normally, guys, I kind of cheaped out on this deal, and normally I don't do that. I didn't buy any cheap parts. The parts are all good, but when I did the front, I noticed that the ball joints, upper and lower ball joints, were a little loose, and I probably should have replaced them. Any other time I would normally do that, but I was on a time crunch. I wanted to get this stuff installed. I had an alignment appointment set up, and I didn't. And so now it's starting to show. I noticed the last time I did an oil change that this front tire has some wear on it, and I've also noticed a little bit of a shimmy going down the road. And I know it has got to be the suspension as far as the ball joints and possibly the tie rods. So we're doing a couple things today. So first thing we're going to be doing is we're gonna get all the wheels off this thing. I've got new upper and lower, or sorry, lower, upper. I've got new tie rod ends. I've got new sway bar end links. So we're gonna be doing all of that stuff. We're gonna be replacing it. Now, I'm sure that some of you guys are wondering, why are you replacing the whole A-arm? Well, this thing has 205,000 miles on it now. And in my opinion, yes, you can go buy just the ball joints and press them out. It's a huge pain. And I don't like doing that. And the fact that it has so many miles on it, those inner bushings are probably cracked, dry rotted, and need to be replaced as well. So for not a lot more money, you can get the whole replacement arms. And I will list all this stuff in the description like always, guys, so you have links to go buy this stuff if you're doing it on your project. So we're doing that. Now, what kind of accelerated this is I noticed, well, ever since I've lowered this thing, it has rubbed lock to lock. Now, it doesn't rub all the time, but it does rub some. And so I'm gonna get some new tires because that one's all worn. It's not too bad, and most people probably wouldn't even notice it, but it's worn, it makes me crazy. I'm gonna replace the tire. So I'm gonna go to quite a bit smaller tire. This is about a 32-inch tall tire. We're actually gonna go to about a 30-inch tall tire. So we're gonna lose an inch all the way around, so 2 inches total, but it'll be an inch closer to the ground. So while I'm doing that, I'm also going to pull out the rubber isolators in the back to get us about probably a half inch to 3/4 of an inch lower. And then in the front, I'm gonna pull that strut assembly apart. We're gonna take one of those rings out to try to get another half inch in the front. So all in, we should go down another about 1.5 inches is what I'm thinking, which is gonna, I think it's gonna look cool, and it's gonna help close that gap from going to a smaller tire. We should also fix our rubbing issue with that because the tire size that it has now, 275, 55, 20, stock size, and I'm going to a 255, 50. So it's not gonna balloon out as much. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the tires kind of balloon out. They'll be more flush. I like that look better anyway. And the tires are already ordered. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm gonna get measurements all the way around. So I kind of have an idea how far we're gonna go, and then we'll just explain this process, what I'm going to be doing, obviously, as we go through it. But let's get some measurements. It's on flat ground. This is nice and level in here, so we can get that measurement, and this thing is so filthy, it's been raining. But we'll go around and get a measurement in each corner, and write that down, and then we'll start taking it apart, because I'm actually gonna put it up on 4 jack stands and take the wheels and tires. I don't like to take my vehicle to just some random place to get tires put on. I have a guy and he's really careful, but I don't know that he'll be the one jacking it up. So I always take them off, load them in a truck, and take them up to him. So let's get started. I'll get those measurements, and then we'll get this thing up off the ground and start tearing in. So we got the measurements written down. Driver's side front, 31 3/4. Passenger side front, 31 7/8. So what, it's about 1/4 of an inch off. And then driver side rear 32.5, passenger side rear 32 3/4. So it's about a 1/4 inch off in the back as well. That's pretty normal. These guys have some Chevy lean. So what I've done here, guys, is I've got this thing off the ground, got the wheels off. I have it supported right in front of the lower control arm on the frame for the jack stand, and then I've still got the jack under the rear end. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go grab a 21 millimeter. We're going to whip this off real quick, get the shock loose, and then once we lower the rear end, I'll probably actually unhook this as well. You guys can see this little clip here. I need my light over here. Undo the clip that holds this in place, just to give it a little more room to travel. You shouldn't have to, since it's already lowered, get it too far down. The main reason is because that spring's so much shorter. Once we get the shock undone, we may not even have to undo that clip because we should have enough room to sneak that out. Now, I do have helper bags in here, so obviously we're gonna have to thread that out as well. And I don't know if there's a leak in the line or one of the bags, but they have not been working ever since I put them in. So anyway, let's get this shocked out, then we'll lower the rear end and get the spring out of place. So we've got the spring out. I will tell you guys that I did go ahead and unhook the sway bar end link. The rear end just wasn't dropping down far enough without unhooking that. So just the shock and the sway bar end link, which I have aftermarket links that came with that relocation kit for the lower control arm. So I've got this thing out, and my bag, my poor bag, I think that's why. I think there's a small leak in this bag. So I'm going to replace those at the same time, but I won't show you guys that since you saw it in the video where I lowered it. But these are the two pieces that I'm taking out. And you can see that's about, golly, that's probably almost a 1/4 inch right there. Now, it really doesn't need this bottom one. That is really not needed because that's not connected to the body in any way, right? So on the top, however, you are going to want something. And the reason why you're going to want something on the top is because that rubs up against the body. But look how thick the top one is. You're probably talking about between the two, that's at least, golly, that's over 1/2 inch. And so we're going to be taking this one off, but I want to put something up here on the top. And so what I'm going to do is I've got some rubber, just some coolant line or some rubber transmission line or whatever you can get that's this inside diameter. I think that's about 3/4 inch. And we're going to push that around the top of this coil. That way, where it makes contact with the body, we're not going to get a bunch of noise from metal on metal hitting. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go grab that piece and thread it on there, and then we will show you guys what it looks like before we go back together with it. I've got that new piece of heater hose on there, and let's see what size. I think it's 5/8. Yeah, 5/8. 5/8 just heater hose. That is what I strung across the top. Now, I will tell you guys, you can see my grease setting here. I had a time getting that on there. I think if I beveled this end of the spring a little bit, it probably would have went on a little easier. It's just catching that, and I didn't want to get past that. So it did take me a little bit. I did, like I said, put some grease on it to get it to go on. But I think my airbag issue was actually in my T-fitting that teed these sides together, so I'm not going to have to replace it, which is good. So at this point, obviously I got to do this to the other side, but we're ready to set this back in place. Now remember, we're not going to use the bottom or the top. So you see these two. The bottom we're just going to set on the axle. And guys, I'm kind of picky in the fact that I like this facing the same on both sides. So I face this back. So this would be the very back of this. That's how I'm going to set it into place. So put it in there. I'm going to thread my air line back in the hole in the top, and we should be good to start lifting the rear end and buttoning things back together. So you can see I now got the spring in place, and I wanted to show you guys how I place it. The open end is like kind of here over on the side. So let me see if I can put the light down and show you. It's right here. So the open end, and it's exactly the same on both sides. So I'm very particular about putting it there. To me, the spring, if you have one direction and one the other, there could be a potential that you could have a difference or disparity between right and left side as far as height. So when they're mounted the same, and it may not make a difference, but that's one of those picky things that I do. Anyway, so on to what we are doing next, which is I'm putting a new T in. I think that was my issue. So this is the new T fitting, and I'm actually going to put just a little bit of air in those things before I go back up with it. And then these are just the connections that go over the top. If you don't have any of those, you can use zip ties. But the kit does come with them. And I'll link this original kit that I got down in the description down below. But I'm gonna put the T in, put just a little bit of air in them, and then we're gonna jack the rear end up and get those springs realigned. So I've got the air lines hooked up and put a little bit in there. And the reason I like to do that is, for one, it makes the spring a little taller so I don't have to work as hard lifting it up. And it keeps that bag aligned kind of where I want it. So originally when I put those in, I don't think I aligned them quite like I wanted to. But I think at this point, it's nice to have two people. And here's why. If you have somebody that's lifting the rear end up, you can make sure that this spring, because it wants to lean back, goes up in its pocket. So what I do if I don't, which I don't have two people, is I'm gonna jack it up just a little bit, make sure that we're good. I'm gonna check the slack on the lines because I didn't zip tie the lines, the air lines up yet. Make sure we're good, jack it up a little more, and we're sliding back and forth between sides in order to make sure it goes up in that pocket. So it's kind of cumbersome, and like I said, it helps if you have two people. It's really nice if you have three, one on each side to watch it go in the pocket and another one to lift. But since I don't, that's how we're gonna do it. This thing lifted up into place, and all I have to do at this point is just hook the shock up and the sway bar end link. I will tell you guys, if you don't know the torque specs, they are listed in that lowering video. So I think what I might do is, because there's not much here, I'm gonna probably put the wheels and tires, the original ones, back on. And once I do that, maybe I can just get a measurement. I don't know, I guess I'm just kind of interested to see if it went down any. Now, in the time the spring was out, it'll probably need a little bit of time to settle, so we may not get it real accurate, but I don't know, I just like to see what kind of drop, because I haven't lifted the front or taken the tires off the front yet, so I just kind of like to see what it would be. But I'm gonna go ahead and button this all up, and then, yeah, I think we'll try that. So I should have known better, but I put it down. I don't know why, because I'm gonna have to take the wheels back off, but it's actually about a 1/4 inch higher, which is pretty common because it hasn't settled. I think once I drive it down the road, it is going to settle at least a 1/2 inch lower. So I'm gonna assume that it is, and I'm gonna go ahead and take another 1/2 inch out of the front while we've got it apart. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get the front, or the back off the ground. I didn't zip tie my lines back. I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie those, get those wheels off, and then we will move to the front at that point. So I am gonna lift, probably lift on the side here, because it's so low in the front with that air dam that it's almost impossible to get a jack under the front of it. So especially once I get the back off the ground and get the wheels off. So next thing you guys are gonna see, we will be on to the front. So let's take a look at the stuff that we're gonna unhook here. We've got, I'm gonna start with this guy here. I just use a flat blade screwdriver and just pop these connections loose. And you have a couple different options. You could pull this out, which is what I've done. It was actually a little loose. And then we need to unhook up here out of the frame. Generally, you can pinch this and pull it apart. We just need that out of the way because we're gonna have to take the spindle off, obviously. Now, I'm gonna take this 10mm out that's on top of the A-arm here. Now that holds the brake line. We'll take it out. And then I'm gonna take, instead of taking the brake loose caliper and the bracket, I'm just gonna take the bracket off so we can just move it out of the way. And then what I'll probably do is grab a strap and hang it from the frame. So just 2 18s that hold the bracket to the spindle is what we're gonna use. See if I can grab it here. Oh, actually, I like to thread these little 10mm back in, and we can go back and get them. That way we know where they're at. See if I can find my 18. Those are tight because they have Loctite. I think I need to take my extension off. Yep. It's amazing how much that extension robs in power. Even though it's built for an impact, it still uses some power. All right, I'm gonna go grab something and we'll hang, like I said, we'll hang this rotor over here, or the caliper over there, and then we'll get the rotor out of the way. I just used a bungee cord. I don't like a lot of pressure on my brake lines. They're old. So anyway, on to what we're gonna do next, and we're gonna go ahead and take the rotor off. And I think it's a T30 or a T25. Get this nut or bolt out and get this out of the way. It's a T30. Normally I don't like, I'll probably put that back in by hand. And brakes are coming very soon, guys. At some point, we're gonna have to put brakes on this thing. Now we're ready to unhook the spindle. We got an 18 up here on the upper. We've got a 24 on the lower. And then we have a 21 on the tie rod. So how I do this, guys, I'm gonna go ahead, I'll probably take the 21 off here first. And that way this thing's loose and I can move it back and forth. And then we'll go on to these. So I loosen those up, and then obviously we're gonna hit them with a hammer. But let's get this 21 out of here. Sometimes it wants to spin on you, so you may have to put a wrench on the end of it. Just depends if you're lucky or not. And generally, I am not. Got it. So sometimes you'll get lucky in that. Well, nope. I'm gonna grab my sledgehammer, my 4-pound sledge, and we're gonna hit it right here to knock that loose. Generally the tie rod doesn't take much. There we go. See how much plays in that? I think the other side's worse. So we definitely need to replace that. Holy cow. Yeah. So on to, I'm gonna have to use, let me put this back on here. I'm gonna have to use my breakover bar for the 24 on the bottom. Like I said, I don't have enough room. It's not high enough in the air. So we'll just have to loosen it by hand. I think I've got enough room, since it's 2-wheel drive, to sneak my impact in to get that 18. But let me get this one loose, and then we'll move on to that 18. I guess since I'm feeling really strong, there's not a lot of torque on these. We'll see if we can get this loose. Sometimes it likes to spin. I think we're getting lucky, guys. The bottom one's completely loose. And it's not as imperative, like, you know, on the older trucks, like my white OBS, you would want to keep these hooked up. You don't necessarily have to do this or do it like that on this. I do, but you could take these completely off because the pressure is on the actual strut, so you don't have to worry about the spring shooting out and hitting you like you would on you know, an older truck. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this in a couple spots here and see if we can get it loose. Wasn't much to that one. Let's see if we can get the bottom one. Let's see what happens. Take this one off. Probably gonna spin now. Yep. So I may get my jack over here. Yeah, this is, look how bad that is. That is toast. I'd say that's a lot of my issue. It should be, you know, snug. Anyway, I'm gonna turn the camera off because I'm probably gonna have to beat the crap out of this one to get it off of here. Now, normally I wouldn't tell you guys this, but since we're replacing this, you could hit the bottom ball joint. Just make sure you don't mushroom out the end to make sure that you put the new nut on. Wasn't as bad as I thought. So, let's look at this. Well, the bottom one's not terrible. I mean, it needs replaced too, but not to the extent of that one. So we'll move on. I'm gonna move on to the bottom of the strut. 15 millimeter is generally what it takes. And then I'm gonna go grab a 15 millimeter wrench and we're gonna get the sway bar link out. You can see that it's not terrible either, but it does have some wear on it. And we're replacing it anyway. As I said, 15 on the bottom, 15 on the top here. And this sometimes takes a minute. Okay, I'm a liar. This impact, this electric impact, guys, this thing's a life changer. Now, I haven't done the other side. You're gonna have to do, look at all the rust in there. Definitely needed replaced. It probably won't come out. Oh, generally they don't come out until you get the other side. The other side's still tight. But we can go ahead and now we're gonna move on to getting the strut out of place. Generally there's some push-on connections here. I just take a flathead screwdriver and pop them off. And then, guys, you can do this from under the hood if you want. I generally don't because they're not really tight. I think they're like 18 foot-pounds, something crazy low. So I just use a ratcheting wrench from the open side here. Just make sure that when you're going back together, you push these back on. It just keeps them away from heat. And then we'll get that 18 in here and start loosening these up, and then we'll have the strut out of the way. Once you get all three of these off, well, come on, there we go. You can go ahead and pull this strut out, and I just push down on the bottom A-arm. Pull this thing out. And remember, I'm gonna take a ring out, so we're gonna have to take this thing apart. But now we've got everything loose. You can see how this is kind of spring loaded. That's that rubber bushing. And so we need to think about that when we're putting it back together, but we'll talk about that. Now, before I take this apart, I'm gonna take a marker and I'm gonna mark where the cambers are. So these eccentrics right here, I'm gonna mark those camber plates or eccentrics or alignment plates, whatever you wanna call them. I'm gonna mark on both sides, on the plate, on the frame, and on the bolt. The bolt really doesn't matter because it only goes in one way, but on the camber for sure in the frame. That way we could try to get it as close to the original alignment as possible. Now it's still gonna need an alignment, don't get me wrong, but once I mark those, then we can go ahead and take the bolts out, and I believe that they are 21s. They are 21. So, and then the other thing is make sure that you put them back in the same way. So notice that the head of the bolt is on the inside here, so they're pointing out. So make sure you put the bolts back in that way. But we're gonna go ahead, mark those, and get those out of the way. So the other thing to remember is you kind of want to take the nut off the backside because the adjustment is on the inside. This is all going to come out in one unit. make sure that you keep your markings. I don't know if you guys can see my marking on that one. That's where we want to line it back up. So I put it together and set it aside just the way it came apart so we don't have any confusion. And I also set it like, I'll set this on the right side and the other one on the left side so we don't get the side to side confused. I couldn't get my impact in here. You notice when I took the pressure off this A-arm falls. So when we go back together, when we're tightening it up, we want to put it like this. Try to get it lined up as close as possible, and then we're going to tighten it where it's setting like it was before. Otherwise, you could have some binding. But we'll talk about that when we go back together again. Not a ton of room on this side. So we're going to put it back together just like we did the other side, and that A-arm is ready to come out. I might clean these bolts up a little bit on my bench grinder because they are kind of rusty. And you can see, oh my gosh, look at that. You can see what I'm talking about. These bushings are in pretty decent shape, but there is some weather cracking in there. And to me, like I said, guys, if you're gonna spend the time to replace just this, buy the whole arm. It's like $30 more, worth every penny. Now we're ready to move on to this bottom A-arm, and 18 on the actual bolt, and then 24 on the nut. So yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't understand that, but that's the way it is. So we're gonna put a 24 on one side. I'm gonna see if I can get my impact, just because it'd make my life a lot easier if we could impact this thing out of here. If not, it can be done with a breakover bar. I think it torques pretty high, like 140, maybe 160, somewhere up there. But we'll get those two bolts out, and both the bolts, the head of the bolts on the front of the vehicle. So this bolt goes in like this, and so does the other one. So just remember that when you're putting it back together, not to reverse them. So it's not like the top where they go out like this. They both go in from the front. So I'm gonna get this out of the way, and then we'll move on to the tie rod, and we'll have everything apart. So I got both the bolts out, and sometimes, guys, these are a pain to get out. That wasn't too bad. A lot of times the new ones are a pain to get in. At this point, I'm gonna grab something. I don't remember what size this is. I want to say it's standard actually, but here's a 21. Yeah, I don't even think I have a wrench that big. So I'm gonna loosen this up. I'm gonna hold it up here somewhere. I'll probably get a pair of vice grips to hold it. This thing is notched. It's a hexagon, so you'll be able to grab onto it at some place. But once we loosen this jam nut, we should just be able to spin this thing off. Now, I'm hoping to see if we can mark this as the top, and really I'm hoping to come off, just loosen this enough to thread this thing off, because the closer I get it, the closer we're going to be as far as alignment goes. So I was able to get it loose, and I didn't even move it one full turn. Then you'll have the ability to spin this old guy out of the way. And then, guys, we are completely finished with disassembling this. So the only other thing I need, well, I say, if you were just doing this job. The only other thing I need to disassemble is the strut, and I won't show you guys that because that's in that same lowering video when I did that. So if you want to know how to disassemble that Beltec strut, the assembly anyway, or the disassembly, that is in that video, which I'll link in the description of this one. So we're ready to go back together. Let's go grab some parts. Now we're ready to reassemble, and what I've got here is the new lower A-arm. And guys, this one is not slotted, so you don't have to worry about really lining it up. Now what I will tell you is, like I was talking about when I took it out, I'm going to put a jack stand under it and bring it up here for when we torque it down. And actually, I'm not even going to torque it down until it's on the ground. So, but while I'm getting it tight or snug, I'm going to put a jack stand under it to just kind of keep it level like it was when it was coming out. And the reason why is you don't want any binding in these bushings. So I'm also going to put a little bit of grease around each side, and then we're going to slide it in. And remember, our bolts come through this way, so from the front on both the back and the front one. So the bolt will go in just like this. And honestly guys, it seems like it lines up pretty good. I've set it up in there, and a lot of times like the aftermarket ones, you're gonna have to tweak it around trying to get the bolts lined up, but I've had pretty good luck just setting it up in there just to test fit it. So they are side specific. Of course, your hole goes in the back for your sway bar bushing, and then the ball joint faces down. So I'm going to go ahead, put some grease on this area here and get it into place. Now I've got the bottom in, I've got it snugged up. You can see I've got it resting on this jack stand to kind of keep it in this area. Now it is snug where it doesn't want to fall down, but once I put the spindle and stuff on it, it's going to want to move. The other thing is it does have a grease cert that you need to put in. 5/16 is what this one is, and the top one I believe is 1/4. So anyway, we're going to move on to the top A-arm here, and for it, pretty much the same thing. Just make sure you get the right side. This guy has that spot for the brake line. Remember, the brake line ties in there. I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on this as well, and we're going to slide it into place, and we're going to use those original eccentrics with the bolts. Remember, the bolts go through this way and that way, so the outside, the nut will be on the outside of both sides. So we're going to get it in and try to somewhat line it up, and we're also going to kind of keep this straight while we're torquing those bolts down. Now for now, I'm just going to get them snugged where this thing doesn't want to move, and then we'll go back and torque them once this thing has some weight on it. Now you can see that this is kind of straight. I've snugged those down to where this doesn't have a ton of movement in it, and we'll torque that once I get weight on the vehicle. Same way with the bottom. But at this point, I did go ahead and put the grease cert in as well up top here. And so now we're going to go ahead and actually, we're going to take this protector off that it ships with. But I think I'll go ahead and grab my tie rod and spin it onto place. So now I've got this spun onto place. It literally just spins on, and I've got the grease cert in it. So at this point, I think we're ready to grab the spindle and get it into place. Check out how hard that is to move. It definitely needed new ones. So let's go grab it, and we may have to put a jack under this and lift it up a little bit in order to get this seated, because you don't have a ton to push here. So like I said, I'll probably put a jack and a block under this and lift this up a little bit. So actually, to make my life a little easier, I'm gonna go ahead and put the strut in place. I was sitting here thinking, like, yeah, it'd be easier than trying to sneak it around the spindle. So I've got that ring taken out. Like I said, guys, if you want to see that, go back and watch the video where I actually lowered this. There's a section of rings that go underneath this cup, and so I just took one of them out. That should be a 1/2 inch. So we're going to thread this thing up in there and get these 18 started on the top. That's something I will torque with weight on the vehicle. So we're just going to thread them down, and then we can get the spindle into place. So I've got the strut in. I've just got those two 15 started at the bottom, the 18 started on the top. We're just going to set this guy into place. You can see the jack underneath it here. So we're going to try to get both of them lined up at the same time. Hopefully that's the case. Got the bottom one. And these come with new bolts or nuts. We'll put them on. And then we can go ahead and torque these. So top 37, bottom 92. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the tie rod in here as well, and it goes to 44. Now, the tie rod does have a castle nut that you have to put a cotter key in, so you may have to swing just a hair past 44. But I'm gonna go ahead and torque this down. If the center starts to spin, it does have a hex head on this in the middle, so you can use like an Allen key or something to keep it from spinning while you tighten it up with the wrench, because a lot of times that happens. Now that we have that spindle in place and torqued, like I said, 37 top, 92 bottom, 44 on the tie rod, then I'm gonna go ahead and torque these down. These torque to 37, the bolts that hold the bottom of the strut in, and then they also torque to 37 at the top, but I'm gonna do that from under the hood, just because I can't do that with my ratcheting wrench. So other than that, we're ready to put the brake back together and try to put some weight on the front of this, but we'll get the brake next. The brake rotor, actually we'll just grab it right now. And I really need to put brakes on this thing, guys. But you need to line up this little T30 that we took out. Go ahead and put it in place. And I don't torque this, I just literally get it snug. You can almost do it by hand. You don't want that thing to rest in place. And then we can get the brake rotor on and the two 18mm bolts in it. Now we need to put this 10mm back in place on the top of the A-arm. And then we need to torque the brake. Remember, I only took the bracket loose, so I don't have to worry about the guide pins. 122 foot-pounds, so that's quite a bit on this guy for those two 18s behind it. This, I literally just snug down. Don't get crazy, you will snap this off. There's not much to it. And then I will go grab, I'm gonna go ahead and put this line back in place, and I'm gonna go grab my the sway bar bushing, the new sway bar end link. So we've got this new sway bar bushing, and kind of how it works, you see you have these 4 bushings, and then you have 3 of these washers. So we're gonna go washer, and then a bushing, and then it'll go around this. So I'm coming up from the bottom, and then we're gonna go another bushing, but we're gonna face it down. I wish it wasn't white because I'm getting it all dirty. And then that flies all the way across the room. And then there's a little stand that goes in between. And then we will have another washer, and then a bushing. And then we'll put that bushing that flew under the car, and then this cap on the top that has the washer built in. So the way you're gonna know this is tight is the bottom or this bolt that comes through should be flush with the top here, which I do like, instead of that big piece sticking off like the factory one. And you should be able to take a couple fingers and not be able to turn this center section. You can see I can turn it right now. The other weird thing is it seems like it's 14 on the bottom and 5/8 on the top here. No idea why it's like that, but that's the sizes that fit best. So I'm gonna go ahead and snug that down, and I think we'll go ahead and get some weight on this thing. And when I say put some weight on it, I'm probably gonna just put some blocks under it for now. Get the weight setting on it, and we're gonna torque the lower A-arms, so where we bolted them to the truck, we're gonna torque those to 127 foot-pounds, and then we're going to torque the top to 140. So we're gonna torque these outers, the nuts on these, same thing on the bottom. We're gonna torque the nut to 127, up top 140. Now that we've got everything torqued, the last thing we need to torque is under the hood, those 18mm. I've got pressure up on the jack here, lifting from the bottom of the A-arm. So I did that so I could, like I said, torque the uppers and the lowers. I think 140 is a little too strong for up top, so I went to 127, the same as the bottom. I didn't want my alignment guy having issues trying to get that loose. So I am gonna go ahead and put 37 on the top. We're gonna push those connectors back on that we took off earlier. And other than that, guys, really all we have to do is have to duplicate the same process on the other side. and I need to put grease in all my grease certs. So at that point, I think the next thing you guys are gonna see will be me putting on the new wheels, or well, the same wheels, but with new tires. At this point, I've got it on the ground, and it's really not settled. Those tires are kind of tucked in, but what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and torque the wheels to 110, probably 100 foot-pounds, somewhere in there. The spec calls for 140, and I just think that's too much. So I'm gonna torque these down. We're gonna get it out, get it cleaned up, and then we will take a walk around after it settles a little bit, and we'll get some new measurements. So at this point, guys, we are finished up, and I think it looks amazing. We're back from the alignment shop. I've got measurements, and actually it went down about 1 inch in the front and about 1/2 inch in the back. So why only 1/2 inch in the back? Well, I knew that we would go down some by taking those rubber isolators out, but the airbags weren't working before, and now they are. So with a minimum of 5 pounds in them, it brings it up 1/2 inch. And so we also dropped, on paper, these tires going from the stock size, the 275/55/20, to these, which are 255/50/20. On paper, it shows that they would go down 1 inch. It goes from a 32-inch tall tire to roughly about a 30-inch tall tire. But when you stacked them up side by side, it wasn't 2 inches of drop, or would technically be 1 inch because you'd split that. So it was actually closer to a 30 and a half to 31-inch tire. So we got about 1/2 inch of drop just out of going to a smaller tire, and we also have no rubbing issues. But as I said, the alignment went great. I wish I had that sheet out here, but I did measure it, and like I said, about 1/2 inch all the way around. 1 inch in the front and 1/2 inch in the back is about what we dropped, and it is looking good, guys. Like I said, I just got through washing it, cleaning it all up. I wanted to show you guys it all clean for the end of this video, and let me know what you guys think as far as the new drop goes. I mean, it's not substantial. It's not like when we first did the drop, how much, you know, that was an obvious difference, but it still looks good to me. And talk about handles, so much nicer. Definitely needed those upper and lower ball joints. I'm sure the bushings didn't hurt either. They were somewhat dry rotted, and the sway bar end links were almost shot. So just a combination of all those things has made this thing drive so much nicer that it was definitely worth it. But with that being said, guys, I will tell you that I have been thinking about selling this thing. So if anybody's interested, you can hit me up in the email. I'm thinking, like, it's a 2011. It's got 206,000 miles on it now. I'm thinking like 10 grand. I may be high. I think that's what I'm going to list it for, but I know some of you are going to be disappointed about that, but hey, I'd like to move on to something else. This is like my daily driver. We get in it and go everywhere, and I've been thinking about some other options. So maybe it stays, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't sell, obviously it'll still be here. You guys will see it in videos, and I still have another video that I want to do on this thing. There's one other thing that I want to fix, but everything actually works on it. It is two-wheel drive, which, you know, a lot of people don't want, but you know, I was going to slam it, so I decided to go with the two-wheel drive, and I rarely use four-wheel drive anyway. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you think about the new drop? What do you think about me selling this thing? And of course, guys, like always, if you are not subscribed, please go down there and smash that subscribe button. Of course, ring the bell icon. That notifies you every single time we drop a new video. And stay tuned to see what we work on next.